sorry. Kia ora mai tātou, nā mihi nui nāku kia koutou katoa. E na mana, e na reo, e na mate, e na waka o te motu, na kaumātua, na kuia, tēnā koutou katoa. We've got 15 minutes, so I'm going to try and cram this. But I'd like to just start by thanking you for, one, for asking me back, but the other one is for all of you who have hosted me in your beautiful regions in the last year. So I have a love affair with this country, but it's grown a lot deeper. When away from conferences where our worlds are edited, when you get into the real heart of having a cup of tea in somebody's staff room, and people are talking about the real grit of what learning and teaching is. And I've also spent quite a bit of time overseas because the world is watching us really, really carefully with a great deal of hope, because I think our country will be the first to walk its education out of a neoliberal construct. It will be the first country to do it. You know, and they're watching, and you can feel with so much hope. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. I want to talk about the bit in the equation that probably doesn't live under the limelight. It's not the bit about policy. It's a bit about embedding and making the change where it's not seen. So that photo, which I played around too much with on Photoshop, was my old school, but really, I want to start with this. When I was at school, we had a bloody awful school song, and some of you also probably had them. And ours started, "Sons and daughters of town and countryside gathered together, here we sing." Well, really, that was a moment before Simon Cowell was going to press the red cross and send everybody spinning into oblivion, because it was a crap song. And you know, every time we'd been naughty at school, we got herded into the hall, and the belief was if we sang the school song, then somehow everything would come right. Needless to say, it didn't, and I got expelled in the end, but those two things weren't related. But at the end of that song, it was written by some music teacher who was obviously hauled out of purgatory to write the thing and sent back. But there was one little beat at the end of it. After all this platitudinous rubbish, the last line said this. It said, "Cry kia kaha, ever be strong." And that has kind of seared its way in like a tattoo on my identity, is that, you know, the reason that we're here, that we're still in this profession, is because of strength. And it's not strength that is talked about a lot. Sometimes we come here to sup at the well of other people to reaffirm ourselves. But most of the time, it's a wet Tuesday, and we're just trying to draw on strength to fill up gaps. Well, it seems to me that the issue that we're going to really face will come after the policy change. So if we ever look at something like the abolition of national standards, what happened was that for over 30 years we have been trained to be passive. And so many schools found themselves in the position of going, oh, so I don't have to do this. What do I do? And some people who had strength went, all right, we will do this and this and this. But we've actually been trained not to do that. We've been trained to sit and wait, to inherit something, even though we understand at the root what the issue is. So for every one of you who responds to those things with solutions instead of problems, you actually shape the education system. You know, when you look at 1939, when the big debate started, and into the early 40s that changed our education system, made us radical in the world, that really, the history books tell us about Fraser and Beebe. Bollocks, it wasn't. It was Mary Perettini and Susie Wilson and Charles whatever in some school embedding that thing so it got roots. It was you who changed the things. History is a terrible distortion on this because it makes invisible the people who really affect things. But I want to show you something that I think lies at the heart of this. Our ability to change things comes from what this is here. It's about being able to be in a group of people who don't think the same way. So not being ideologically captured with a single, because I thought your point was really good. You know, there's not, going in with the idea that there's a single answer in a single way is the most dangerous thing you can do, because it locks into ideological capture. You actually have to have things constantly doing this. And one of the things one of the big problems with our education system was, I think we tried to simplify the idea that there was such a thing as an average student. And there was the signs of a good school, and they met these descriptions. And there was this idea that average exists, which it doesn't. An average idea doesn't exist. And one of the ways I think is that you can really understand it is that the richness lies in our diversity. So I'm going to show you something. I'm going to ask you to do something. Don't worry, no standing up in this one. Okay. It's very simple, and it's just the fact that, you know, if you read anything this morning, not a single one of you actually read that the same way. Your brains do not process information in the same way. What you've been listening to there, you all heard something different. You prioritized certain things, left some things out, pushed some things together. And so we know that when you're working in education, we're dealing with what we call neurodiversity. And it sounds like a flash term, but what it basically means is your extraordinary, beautiful brain does not process things the same way. So we cannot teach you the same way. We have to, and nor can we develop educators the same way or develop schools the same way, that we have to work inside flexibility. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you something. Now, you can't be wrong with this. I know it's hard to believe that you get shown something and tested and you can't be wrong. You go, nowhere in 30 years have I remembered that. But let's just imagine for a moment. And all I'm going to ask you to do is write a number down. Okay, and if you haven't got something in front of you, just write it with your finger on your hand. But remember, you can't be wrong. So this is very simple. Just have a look at this.
It's a test of selective attention. Count how many. This is a test of selective attention.
Don't worry about the voice.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer.
Stop.
How many passes?
Cool. Right, sorry. Thank you.
Did you see the gorilla?
Okay. Write that number down on your hand or on a bit of paper or something. Stop. Okay. Now, how many of you saw 14? 16? 13? 18, 12,
This
15, a number I didn't call out. Now, I'm going to ask you, if you're sitting at the front, to turn back and have a look at the group. I'm going to do that again, and you watch. So here's a room full of people who've got degrees. Most people here have got degrees, or they are incredible. No, I'm not being disparaging. I don't actually believe terribly much in degrees, or you are you're very bright. I mean, we don't tend to say that ourselves, but you're pretty bright. Now, have a look again. I'm going to ask you to put up, you're not wrong, all right? Okay, put up your hand if you've got 16, 14, 13, 17, 15, another number. Now, you watched the same text on the same day at the same time, an identical thing, and yet in this room that was scattered, really scattered. Now, here's the interesting thing. While we might go, there is a right answer there, there's not, because that thing is put together based on perception, on your depth of field of viewing. So, if I asked you a question like this, how many of you could say what the letter is that is scrawled hugely on the walls behind? How many of you could say what that letter is? About a sixth? Okay. How many of you saw the gorilla? How many of you didn't see the gorilla? Okay. No, don't worry. I didn't see the... Okay, can you play that back again for us?
is a test of selective attention. Count.
Okay. Okay. Oh, let's stop it there so we don't go to how many counts, Pastor, did you count? Thank you. Okay, we'll jump on to the next thing. This is a thing that I often do with kids when I start working with them. I do these two activities to show them that we think beautifully and quite differently. To get rid of this idea that you're going into an environment where there's a hierarchy of knowing or hierarchy of rightness in the way our brains work. So you've already just demonstrated ruthlessly in this room here that you all see things and make meaning of things in different ways. But I'd like to show you another example this is even more graphic, and what will really help is if you happen to, I know most of you are digital here, but if you have a piece of paper and a pencil with you, that will help. If not, you've got some drawing system on your tablet that you can work with. I'm going to ask you to do something partway through this, and it's a very simple thing, but it's going to show you how you construct meaning very, very differently to other people. And to do it, I'm going to tell you a story that's over 3,000 years old. And I hope, like hell, that you haven't heard it. All right. So I was looking at your family at the McDonald's. We're actually related over there. So, way up the north there, there was an area that has got a very big influence from Scandinavia. And the Trows are what in Scandinavia we would call trolls. So the Trows, but they're not a Peter Jackson dribbling thing. The Trow was effectively the first inhabitant of the land. They were the indigenous. And when humans came, because of their technology and skills, they drove them out. So Trows went into hiding and only came out at night. So they hunted at night. They hated human beings. They attacked them. But they were not stupid. In fact, their way of entertainment was that they posed riddles to each other. So when they had big banquets, their great entertainment was not playing music, but playing with riddles. And this is a story called Olkia and the Trow. So it goes a little bit like this. Olkia was she was only about 12 years old. And she'd lived on a poorer farm, and her mum and dad said to her, look, go and work for the next door neighbours because they've got a big house, or big room in the house, they've got plenty of fuel, and they've got a new baby. So she went off to work for them. Now she was 12, and in the way of most 12-year-olds, she was a little bit bossy and thought she knew the world, but she was a good kid, and she was very reliable, and they came to depend on her. But in the middle of winter, because it's very dark up there in winter, there's only a few hours of light, on the solstice, they had an invitation to go to another neighborhood, to another farm in the neighborhood. Now, this was a frightening time because when food was short, the Trows started hunting at night, and they would break into houses and steal people and eat them. And so they said to Olkia, look after the baby. There's plenty of fuel here. Look after the baby, and we'll be back tomorrow morning. Because the baby was too young to travel across the snow to the neighbor's place. So Olkia says, that's good. They go, and there's a window and a door. They lock the door, and she sits there, and she loads up fuel on the fire, and she's sitting there, and it's fine, but you can hear the wind blowing through the snow. And she's a bit worried because she knows that there's this whole Trow thing out there. And the fire dies down and down and down, and she goes to sleep. And then she's awoken, and she hears a kind of scratching noise. And at first she can't work out what it is. And then she realizes there's something at the window. And she walks over and a shadow moves. And she looks through, and there, looking in the window, at her and the baby, is a Trow. Now, the Trow can easily break the window. The Trow can easily break in through the door. And she looks, and it looks past her, and it sees the baby. It sees the fire dying down, and she knows they're finished. There's nothing she can do. But she's a smart kid. And she says, just a moment, I know that you can get in here. I know you can break the window, you can knock down the door, I know you can take us, and you've seen me, and there's a baby. And you can be away with us, and the snow will have blown away your footprints, and we will just be another disappearance. So you can do that, that's no challenge. So maybe I'll open the door for you now. But what if we were to make this a little bit harder? She said, I know your culture, that you are masters of the riddle. Well, what if we play a game? We play a riddling game. If I answer it correctly, then you have to promise that you will never come to this valley and none of your people will invade the families of this valley. You'll leave them safe. And if you win, I open the door and you can take us. So it was a challenge that Tro was really hard pushed to ignore. So he said, okay. He said, well, would you like to go first? And she said, a couple of rules first, remember. One, by point of honor, both of us must stick to the agreement. Whoever wins, what they have asked for, that's what happens. Tro says yes, and she said, and the other rule of riddling, and the Tro said, I'll make this clear. The thing must exist. Whatever is in the riddle, it must exist and be known to both participants. So you can't make up something. That's fine. And she said, all right, well, you can go first. And Tro looks past her, looks at the baby and goes, this is an easy walk over. So he says, 30 white horses on a red hill. Now they stamp, now they champ, and now they stand still. Shit. Looks over and she kind of steps back and she says, how much time have I got to think about this? And he said, well, load fuel onto your fire. One lot of fuel, and when it's died down, you have to have had the answer. Well, this is fine, because Okia knows something really interesting about Tros, that they can take all the time in the world, and they're not afraid really of anything. They're not afraid of other human beings coming back. In fact, the only thing that they have to, because they live for hundreds of years, the only thing that really kills them is if they are hit by light, because they live underground, if they're hit by the sun. But that's not a problem. So she sits down by the fire, and as it dies down, she comes back to the window and she says to him, all right, I know the answer to this. 30 white horses on a red hill, now they stamp, now they champ, now they stand still. My grandmother told me that one. That's an old riddle. And she smiled and she said, you're referring to my teeth. There are 30 white horses on a red hill. Now they stamp, now they champ, and now they stand still. It's my teeth in my mouth while I talk and answer your riddle. And Tro stepped back. This is not what he was expecting. And he looked again at the baby and the fire and her, and he said, right, it's your turn. And she said, all right. In marble halls as white as milk, lined with skin as soft as silk, within a fountain crystal clear a golden apple doth appear. But no doors lead into the stronghold, yet thieves break in and steal the gold. Well, if Tro's had a word for shit, he said shit, because, oh, bugger, this is a tough one. And he said, all right, load the fuel on the fire. So she loads a lot of fuel on the fire. Now I'm going to stop the story for a moment. So again, you've just heard the same text in the same room, okay, on the same day. I want you to look at the room that she's in, and if you have a piece of paper, what I want you to do is this. Just if you were going to draw a plan of that room, show us where is the baby, where is the fire, where is the window, and where is the door. So 5 things. It'll really help if you do it, because you're going to show other people. You can't be wrong. Where is the window? Where is the door? Where is the baby? And where is the fire? Now I'm going to give you another minute, and then I'm going to ask you to show it to the other people in your group, because you will find it's highly unlikely that anybody will have seen the same room, will have drawn it the same way. Okay, another 30 seconds, and then I'll get you to show people. If your drawing's not so hot, you can put a word next to it going, this is a window. It's up to you. Oh, the window, the door, the fireplace, and the baby. 4 things, 4 things. Okay, what I want you to do is show the other people at your table and see if anybody got the same floor plan. Was it?
Got a really good photo.
Oh, did you?
For the photo competition, see?
Oh shit, you got it. Do you photography?
Hey?
Are you a photographer?
No, it's just a photo.
Okay, stop. How many of you are sitting at a table where nobody got the same room? Where nobody got the same room? How many of you are sitting at a table where at least 2 people got, at least 2 different groups got the same room? Okay, whoa, something's happening there. All right, so here's the interesting thing. You can do this with kids, and I get them to put their plans up on the wall so that they can see that when they heard a story, when they heard something as simple as a story, it was all playing out spatially in very different worlds. Your world was constructed differently because you have a backpack of knowledge that has come with you and shaped you. But similarly, you're neurodiverse, so you change emphases. So when I was telling that story, you were co-creating the story. Now, here's an interesting, let me ask you another question. What was the fuel that she put, when I told that story, I did not tell, I just used the word fuel. What did she put on the fire? How many of you say it's wood? How many of you say it's coal? Peat? How many of you say the wood is logs? How many say it's sticks? Okay, so even little details like that, in an open text, you will fill it in. You will fill it in, and I come again, this is why the move we've made from consultation to co-creation, this is what it's based on. If you let people co-create, you get richer stuff into the picture. Get richer stuff pulled in. It's a graphic indication to kids in a room when you see those floor plans going, now we're going to do a lesson on how to do a floor plan, but where they actually see how everybody saw that quite differently. Now the reason is this. It seems to me that if we're going to deal with education in New Zealand, Sylvia Ashton Warner said something really true of us. It's us who will disable or enable any policy that comes through. We've done it for years. The worst things, we get them, we take a few bits of language, ornament stuff, and then kill it off. So we use passive resistance as a profession. But we're being asked now to turn that round. We're being asked to take and grow things, and probably the greatest opportunity in our generation of teaching, to turn something around. And she said way back then, she said, to do that, what we have to draw on is that we have to be true to ourselves and strong in that and brave and wise enough to be able to shape ourselves to what we actually are, because we're having to shape other people's worlds for them. And without that, then we just become passive. We just accept things and moan and cripple ourselves with cynicism or with the death of hope. And that's a dangerous, dangerous thing. And yet we're going away from a place where we are resourcing each other we're resourcing off each other, and we're going to wet Tuesday afternoons. And we're going into the dark where we face an incredible issue under this. Because this is 30 years at least, the parents of the kids that you teach, they were brought up in the system that we're trying to dissolve. So their values have been shaped by it. They are anxiously asking for data, going, how is my child doing? How is my child doing? They have been shaped by that. We have a phenomenal issue where we have to go, you don't need numbers on a page or comparisons between people to understand how someone is learning and be able to design excellent learning environments for them and then be able to describe in great detail how they learn. You don't need that. But remember, they've been shaped by it. So, I come back to this. Thank you for now and for going forward, because the going forward is the big bit. the going forward is whether whatever policies are shaped, what takes roots and grow, and what dies with a few bits of language floating around actually rests on you. And to close it, I'll just pop in the end of the story. Okay, so the fire burns down, and it's really, really slow because she's put on the dampest of whatever fuel it was that you had in your head. And she goes back to the window, and the tro's really not a happy tro. And he says, "This is not a real thing. I am 300 years old. I have never encountered such a thing." And she said, "Yes, you have. Yes, you have." And he says, "Tell me again." And she goes, "In marble halls, as white as milk, lined with skin as soft as silk. Within a fountain crystal clear, a golden apple doth appear." But here's the problem. There are no doors leading into the stronghold, but thieves break in and steal the gold. And his face was back hard up against the window, and he was looking at her eye to eye. And he said, It cannot be." And she said, "Oh, it is." She said, "It's this simple. You steal these in the dark from nests. I eat this in the morning. It's an egg in a marble hall as white as milk, lined with skin as soft as silk. Within a fountain crystal clear, a golden apple doth appear. But no doors lead into the stronghold, yet thieves break in and steal the gold." And the tro looked at her aghast, because here was a 12-year-old human girl who had outmastered in a game of riddles. And then he saw the most extraordinary thing. In her eye, he saw that twinkle of gold, a golden apple. Oh no, that wasn't a golden apple. And he turned in horror, and behind him he saw, coming up of the horizon, over the snow, blackened with shadows, was the sun. And as he did that, he screamed and was turned to stone. And that's the end of the story.